Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 854, Wednesday, July the 31st, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, it is Wednesday, and of course you know what we do on Wednesday. Take out the trash and have chicken. Every Wednesday, I take out the trash and have some chicken. Okay. Got some pretty important news to get into today. 2 or 3 pretty major stories, so we're going to be getting into that. But before I do, I just want to kind of go back to a story that was in yesterday. It was out there, and I had too much to get to, but and I hadn't had a chance to really look at it and read it and check it out. But I've had about 24 hours now to look into this and read through it and kind of look at some of this stuff around it, and I think it's it's a very interesting observation by the Gateway Pundit, who I'm not sure who the Gateway Pundit's investigators are, but they did a pretty good job on this particular story, and it's pretty cool. You know, it's I think it's quite possibly true, but it's one of those things that are kind of out there, but it's certainly worth talking about, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy this. If you have not read the Gateway Pundit story, let me go ahead and go through this with you. So basically what the story is and how it came about is that obviously some of the people over there at Gateway Pundit had taken a look at all the key events and players that were meeting in and around London during the late spring, early summer of 2016. There was a lot of activity going on around London in late spring, early summer 2016. And we all know about a lot of these things that were going on. We talk about them all the time. But what they did here was they took all those dates and activities and all those things going on and all those people who were involved, and then they kind of mirrored that, compared it against the text messages of Peter's Been Stroking Us and Lisa Page from that exact time period. And it's amazing what you can put together when you look at the events going on in London and the people who were involved in them at that exact time frame where Page and Strock are sending these texts. And it's particularly important when you read these texts so you can see the context of what was going on, not just what was going on over across the pond in London, but what was happening back here within the FBI and DOJ while all these things were happening over in London. So first I'm just going to kind of go through this, and then after I'm done I'll kind of go back and try to tie it all together, but I think you'll figure it out as I'm going. So anyway, I'm just going to lay out these facts for you, and then we're going to kind of wrap it up at the end, okay? So let's just take a minute. Okay, so here are some of the things that were going on in London, and right now we're going to focus on a specific period of time. Now this period of time that we're going to focus on is not just in the spring and early summer 2016. We're actually going to go pay real close attention to what was happening right around the 25th to the 30th of November of 2016, about 3 weeks after the election in 2016. So here's some things that were going on. So Mr. Potato Head, John Brennan, makes a trip to Europe in late November of 2016. We know that he stopped off in Portugal, and this was shortly after, keep in mind, the presidential election, just about 2.5, 3 weeks after. Now he's at this meeting, and there's a lot of things going on with that, but that goes down a different road. I don't even want to go there. It's just important to know where Brennan was. Okay, so he's in Portugal, and he's in this meeting, and there are Italian officials there as well. So then after attending this meeting, then Brennan jets off to Lisbon. He's now in Lisbon, right around the 26th, 27th of November, 2016. Now, at that exact same time that this is happening with Brennan, Christopher Steele is meeting with Glenn Simpson and Bruce Orr in Washington, D.C. Now, this was shortly after the election, like around 2 weeks after the election. At the same time that he's meeting there with Bruce Orr and Glenn Simpson, Christopher Steele decides to pay a visit over to the State Department, where he is then meets with Kathleen Kavalik. And of course, now we know that it was Bruce Orr that set up that meeting between Steele and Kavalik. So here's Steele meeting with Simpson and Orr a couple weeks after the election in November, mid to late November, in D.C., and shortly after that meeting, he goes over to the State Department and meets with Kavalik. At the same time, Senator Magoo, the late Senator McCain, and his right-hand man, David Kramer, were told about the dossier. This would have been on November the 18th of 2016, shortly after the election. And Senator Magoo, the late Senator Magoo, was told about the Steele dossier, or about the dossier, by Andrew Wood, who was working on behalf of Christopher Steele. And again, this was November 28th, 2016. At the same time that this is happening, Peter's Been Stroking Us and Loose Lisa Page are talking about going to London. And you can read those text messages about the conversation they're having about going to London. And they had just talked about, in previous conversation, they had just talked about this idea of a meeting of the secret society. The secret society. Many of you remember when those texts were released and we were all talking about this secret society. Now, a little bit later after that, a week or 10 days later, right around the very end of November, a group of FBI agents, and we know who some of them were, fly to London at the exact same time that Kramer, Senator Magoo's right-hand man, has now gone back to D.C. after hearing about the dossier at that meeting in Nova Scotia. They go back, and then the meeting is set up between David Kramer and Christopher Steele in London. Kramer's going to go and get the dossier information that he and McCain were told about when they were in Nova Scotia just 10 days prior. So here, as McCain and Kramer are in Nova Scotia at this conference, they are told about the dossier by Mr. Wood, and he is acting on behalf of Christopher Steele, who at that exact same time, Steele's in D.C. meeting with Orr and Simpson and then Kavalik. So this is all going on, and you have Brennan, who's traveling around Europe, hitting these various places, Portugal, and then Lisbon, and he's in the area, right in the area. And we have Strzok and Page talking about this meeting of the secret society. Then, 10 days after these events are going on, we get to the very end of November, right around the 27th and 28th. Strzok and Page and other FBI agents go to London. And that's the exact same time that Kramer heads over to London to get the dossier from Steele. It's at the exact same time that Brennan is somewhere in the general area. So we know for a fact that Strzok, Page, David Kramer, and Steele were all now in London. Possibly Brennan around the area as well. Possibly Priestep is there as well. And there could be others. And all this is happening. So they go to London. So they're talking about going to London. They're talking about this meeting of the secret society. And so what it looks like, and again, this is just, a little bit of fun in this, but it could very well be true, that maybe what Strzok and Page were talking about this meeting with the secret society, may have been when they went to London and they had this meeting, and that meeting very well could have been with Steele. Kramer would likely have been there, possibly Brennan, and we can assume others, maybe Mr. Breedlove, who else could have been there? Maybe Priestap, maybe Mr. Halper, maybe Mr. Downer, maybe Mr. Mifsud, maybe others. Hard to say. Maybe Mr. Gatta. Hey, maybe Mr. Weiner. Who knows? Who all would have been at that secret meeting, or the meeting over in London of the secret society. But when you look at the dates and you look at the page in Strzok text, and they're talking about this meeting of the secret society, then 10 days later they're in London. At exactly the same time, all these other people are in London, and all these things are happening, and this was roughly 2.5 weeks after the election. It sure looks like that what they were talking about was this meeting of the secret society was actually held in London, and it involved Steele, Kramer, Strzok and Page, and that's the people we would know of, and then possibly Brennan, because he was in the neighborhood. Brennan was in the neighborhood. Priestep may have been in the neighborhood. He was there during that week. So, and we don't know what other players. It could have been Halper, could have been there, could have been Downer, could have been Mifsud, could have been all three, could have been who other people. Mr. Dearlove certainly we would think would be there. So this is very possibly when they were talking about Peter's been stroking us, and Loose Lisa Page talking about going to London, and this first meeting of the secret society. It's very possible, it's likely, I should say, that this is what they were describing, is what took place in London about 2.5 weeks after the election, when all these people were in London. And keep in mind, this is after the election, where they were likely plotting the coup. Having failed at stopping Trump, they all got together to launch and discuss the launch of the coup. Very interesting, don't you think? You can read that story in the Gateway Pundit, and so you may want to do that. It's maybe a little bit easier if you read it. So anyway, it's pretty cool, and I thought you might enjoy that. Now, let's get to the really big news that was broke on Sean Hannity's show last night by Jay Sekulow, which is, of course, the lawyer, one of Trump's lawyers. He's also one of the heads, if not the founder, I believe, of the American Center for Law and Justice. They did some FOIA requests about 2 years ago, and they have just received those documents from that FOIA request, and it is absolutely bombshell. I mean bombshell. And Sekulow, Trump's attorney, along with other people who are looking at this now, lawyers, are absolutely going to move forward. I assume this will find its way in front of Attorney General Barr, and I imagine if Mr. Huber is the guy who is looking into this, if you can get him off the golf course, he might want to have a take a look at this, because it sounds like serious criminal violations by at the very least, Loretta Lynch, Silly Sally Yates, the dishonorable former director of the former Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, James Comey. So, here we go. ACLJ has obtained the Obama Department of Justice's immunity agreements with the Rotten Reverend Clinton's lawyers, Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson. Oh yes, the immunity agreements. You're not going to believe this. Both Mills and Samuelson were given immunity from prosecution for anything found on their laptops. This violates multiple felony criminal statutes governing the mishandling of classified information and or the removal or destruction of records, including the Espionage Act provisions. All 62,320 emails from the Rotten Reverend Clinton server were on those two laptops held by Mills and Samuelson. This entire time that everybody's trying to find all those emails, including the deleted ones, the DOJ had them right there on Samuelson and Mills' laptops. They had them. The emails that everybody was looking for, the ones that the rotten Reverend Clinton destroyed, were on Mills and Heather Samuelson's laptops. And the DOJ had them. Wait till you hear what they did with them. The Department of Justice took control of the two laptops, agreeing to severely limit its searches. They agreed to unlawfully shield the laptops from FOIA requests. Then they agreed to dispose of the laptops. Basically, Lynch and Comey did everything they could to protect Clinton's lawyers from criminal liability and public scrutiny. The emails at the time that they were destroyed, as they were on the laptops which were destroyed, were under subpoena at that time. So they've got all of the rotten Reverend Clinton's emails that everyone's looking for, the ones that are under subpoena, and the DOJ takes complete control of those two laptops and destroys them, but not before granting immunity, not just for classified information that would have been on the laptops, but protecting them from even being able to be turned over through FOIA requests. Essentially, what you see happening here is that the DOJ gave complete immunity to Mills and Samuelson from any investigation or looking into anything that they were involved in of a criminal nature, including the emails, classified information, violations of the Espionage Act, the whole 9 yards. Then they actually themselves, just to make sure, took those laptops, which contained all of the rotten Reverend's emails, including the ones that were under subpoena that everyone was trying to find, and they destroyed them to make sure no one could get to them. The DOJ, under Obama, that's Loretta Lynch, Silly Sally Yates, along with Comey, and likely McCabe in on this as well, knew that they had the laptops with all the incriminating emails. They granted immunity to Samuelson, as well as Cheryl Mills. Then they took charge of those laptops, and they took care of destroying the actual emails that were under subpoena that everyone was trying to find. They literally helped Mills and Samuelson destroy the evidence that would incriminate them and the rotten Reverend Clinton, and likely Obama as well, and others. Wow. Wow. And, just as was stated by Jay Sekulow, this violates what they did, what the DOJ did, violated multiple felony criminal statutes governing the mishandling of classified information and or the removal or destruction of records, including the Espionage Act provisions. There are FOIA. It violated FOIA. It violated freedom of information. It violated, there's 3 or 4 different specific federal violations involved in destroying that stuff, not to mention the fact that the reason they were destroying it, their motive, their intent, what was actually there, the fact that the stuff was under subpoena, and just the whole thing is mind-blowing. If you can go back to that time in your mind, remember, everyone was trying to find out what happened to them. And the DOJ and FBI are acting as if they're cooperating, or acting as if they're involved in the investigation to try to turn this stuff up, when in fact, they had it all, and they helped destroy it, helped destroy the evidence. The rotten Reverend Clinton, Team Hillary, and a lot of their friends, they've got a lot of problems. Now, exactly how this works out, I mean, this was a corrupt and criminal act, multiple criminal acts that took place here, that they were all involved in. Mills and Heather Samuelson are attorneys who understand that what they were taking part in was illegal. So they may have been granted immunity at the time while this is going on, but what they did in the whole process of that, they're not immune from those crimes. I cannot imagine that this is not going to be devastating and that this is not going to lead to some very serious, multiple criminal charges against all of those on both sides who were involved, which would include the Rotten Reverend, both of our lawyers, Samuelson and Mills, Lynch and Silly Sally Yates, McCabe, Comey, at least, and I'm sure there were others at the DOJ. This is absolutely bombshell right here. And Jay Sekulow said they are pursuing it through the Department of Justice. I can't imagine that Attorney General Barr is going to look at this and not be completely blown out of his mind when he sees it. I mean, this, in fact, he's probably already seen it. That'll get Mr. Huber in off the golf course. Next. No shit Sherlock Christopher Wray. The Federal Bureau of Insubordination is not long for this world. Trump is draining the swamp. He's draining the swamp. And the next one to go will likely be Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray. And it can't happen soon enough. Coates is gone. Comey's gone. And No Shit Sherlock Wray is not far behind. And I kind of think that Gina Haspel may not be far behind him. And I still wonder, how in the hell did Haspel end up getting that job? Trump's getting some very bad advice. Because when they're bringing nominations for those types of positions and they come to the president and say, well, you know, they first go to his chief of staff. You know, the president sees the last 2, 3, 4, 5 people maybe. But there's a process that goes on that's going on to get, you know, the best qualified people to him, and he'll make a final decision typically. He's usually advised on that decision, by the way. And of course, it's someone that has to be able to be confirmed. So I cannot imagine that when you have a list of candidates going for that job, CIA director, that someone, and especially the chief of staff, would not say, well, before I give this to the president, let me have just a short bio of this person. Let's just see, you know, their bio, their education, where they grew up, where they've been working, what they've been doing. Just a basic bio, not an in-depth background investigation. Just, you know, a basic bio that the president can look at. So when he's making a decision, he can look at a couple, you know, people's bios and just, you know, kind of see maybe where they went to school, where they've been working, that type of thing. And had that been done, Gina Haspel could never have been appointed CIA director, because she was the CIA director in London. She was the head of the London bureau for the CIA right during the time when everything was going down in 2016. And if you go through her bio, you will see that she is a John Brennan acolyte. Brennan has brought Haspel along with him throughout most of his career, since he's been in the intelligence business. This was not her first appointment to that post either. It was her second. And that's one of the most prestigious positions you can get in the CIA, is being the station chief in London. Now, I find it very difficult to believe that anyone with a lick of sense in their head would have looked at her bio and said, whoa, she was in London during the time when all this stuff was going down? She's a protege of John Brennan. He personally appointed her and put her there? And you're going to name her as the CIA director. Something ain't right with that, folks. Something ain't right. Just keep that in mind. But let's get back to No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray. Article today by John Solomon in The Hill. Titled, Christopher Wray Continues to Cover for Team Comey's Russia Shenanigans. Chris Wray continues to cover for Team Comey's Russia shenanigans. The FBI is in court right now to fight the public release of a small number of documents sent to agents from Christopher Steele. Specifically, it's Kathleen Kavalik's notes. Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray says it's about protecting sources and methods. Wray is also claiming that FBI agents have privacy interests from unnecessary, unofficial questioning as to the conduct of investigations or other FBI business. In other words, what he's saying is agents don't want to have to answer to the public, which pays their salary, by the way, when questions arise about their investigative work. Now, how is Christopher Steele and Kathleen Kavalik's information a national security issue? It isn't. How can Christopher Steele's garbage be a sensitive national security secret? It's not. Especially since Christopher Steele was giving the information to the Rotten Reverend Clinton campaign from who he was working via their lawyer, Mr. Sussman, as well as damn near every media outlet in D.C. Yet this is what Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray wants to try to prevent. And it's actually CNN is the plaintiff here. It is CNN that is suing for this information. Now, why is that? Because this information and some of these notes include things about this so-called Trump Tower server, where there was supposedly a server in Trump Tower communicating with this Russian Alpha Bank. Now, this has all been debunked, but CNN filed this FOIA request 2 years ago, and they're still pushing it. And so now Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray is in court fighting CNN to try to keep them from seeing this stuff, and you can see the excuses he's making, which no one's buying. I mean, we're talking about the Steele dossier. It's not national security secrets. It's a pile of garbage. And what we want to know is, what did he tell Kathleen Kavalik? And we only know some of it. We've seen some of the notes from Kavalik and Steele, heavily redacted, but we've seen some of it, and we basically know what happened. Steele comes in, the meeting's set up by Orr. We just talked about it earlier. They have this meeting. Steele's giving her all this information. She's checking into it and finding out a lot of it's total BS. And based on that, she forwards this information over to this FBI agent and says, hey, you might want to take a look at this stuff. Steele was just in my office. He's kind of crazy. He's saying things that, quite honestly, some of it's just totally crazy and doesn't even add up. And some of it is just, I don't know. You may want to take a hard look at this stuff. And then, of course, this makes its way into who was heading up the counterintelligence operation at that time, which we know is Peter's been stroking us, and McCabe. They get this information. They clearly ignore it, because 10 days later, they go to the FISA court and get the first warrant on Carter Page. Now, there's other things that probably transpired, and there's other emails that she sent to other people, and that's what Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray is trying to cover up. That's what he's trying to cover up. There are emails that went to other people from Kavalik that we don't know about. There are other things that were discussed that we don't know about. There possibly was response emails from the people she sent that to back to her that's being covered up. This is all the things that CNN's tried to get their hands on. And Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray is in court trying to make the argument that it's top secret. It's national security. Yeah, right. Yeah. information that Christopher Steele got from Google searches, from CNN iReport, is national security. Oh, and we don't want to be looking over the shoulder of FBI agents just doing their job. We certainly can't have that. People certainly shouldn't be able to take a look at what the FBI agents are doing in investigations, even though it looks quite obvious that under the circumstances they had just exonerated a horribly guilty person and tried to frame a perfectly innocent person. A bunch of innocent people, by the way. And they did. Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray. Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray has still not produced, literally, I think there's, last I heard, 18 requests that he's still not fulfilled, going back almost 2 years. From the House Intelligence Committee, from the Senate Judiciary Committee, from the House Oversight Committee. He has never produced any of this stuff. He's blocking it. And now he's trying to block this in court. And he's stonewalling Barr and Durham. If you ask me, I think that Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray should start packing his bags. Trump is probably aware of this. If he's not, he's certainly going to be aware of it very soon, because I'm sure Barr will tell him all about it. So I would say that now that, and it's clear that Trump's draining the swamp, and he knows that he has to get these people out to get the truth out. And he's all about getting the truth out. That's why Coates is gone and Ratcliffe is coming in. And I'm sure that the person who's next on his hit list is No Shit Sherlock Ray. And I imagine it won't be long, and I think this probably sends a message to him, but he probably doesn't care. Probably doesn't care. So I would say that if I was a guessing man, that Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray is not far behind. And once you get rid of him, Haspel has got to go as well. She's also blocking the truth. Got to get rid of them all. You got to drain the whole swamp. And I think that's what Trump is doing. Well, we have another disturbing video from Atlanta. I don't know if you've seen it, but two cops, I don't know what they were doing, writing a ticket, whatever they were doing. All of a sudden, literally, I would say at the minimum 50, it looked like more than 50 to me, people with like super soakers show up and they start dousing the cops with super soakers. And the cops do nothing. They do nothing. Then we have Chuck the Cuck Schumer making a speech on the Senate floor. He is absolutely terrified of Ratcliffe. Terrified of Ratcliffe. And why is Schumer terrified of Ratcliffe? Because Ratcliffe is going to become the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, which means he has all the intelligence from all the agencies. And why does that worry Chuck the Cuck? Well, it has something to do with what Chuck the Cuck said one morning on a Sunday morning news program. It's because the intelligence community has 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. Problem is, it's a problem when one of the good guys is sitting behind a desk figuring things out. Well, in the debates later on this evening, the skateboarder Robert O'Rourke is going to be welcoming as guest these guys who are national anthem kneelers. Can you believe that? This guy has no political instincts. And of course, we have that idiot meathead, Hollywood meathead, Rob Reiner, saying that Trump supporters are racist. Trump supporters are racists. There you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you. Bye.